That's why the appraiser does a neighborhood analysis to determine if the market is looking for that type of property. Maybe the market doesn't care.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome back to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out in the podcast chair. Got a friendly and fun guest coming up. But first, want to remind you, we are sponsored by Alamode Software. Alamode is the way that I get done what I get done, folks. And that means more efficiency, more effectiveness. Check them out. Go to alamode.com or 800-ALAMODE. Of course, another way to save time on every report, specifically about 45 minutes per report, is Datamaster. Datamasterusa.com is where you go to find out if they are in your area, if they are part of your MLS system, and if they are, be prepared, folks. Buckle up for some new efficiencies coming your direction. Datamasterusa.com. Finally, sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP, of course, is the E&O that I've used for the last 3-4 years now. Very, very happy, not only with the insurance coverage that they give me, but also the benefits, including free CE, which I'll tell you about in just a little bit. You can check them out by going to orep.org. That's OREP.org. Well, welcome back to the program. A good friend of mine and very knowledgeable guy, the appraiser's advocate, Mr. Tim Andersen himself. Welcome back, Tim.
Dustin, thank you. How are you?
I am swell, my friend. Sporting a little tan in the middle of winter and enjoying life.
Well, that's great, and my best to your family,
as
always.
Thank you. Likewise. I appreciate you taking time today to be on the program as always. I love deferring to your expertise because I get questions all the time from individuals that, frankly, I have an opinion on, but it's certainly not backed up by any expertise other than 24 years in the field, but that doesn't necessarily make me an expert on USPAP. So on a regular basis, we do this little segment called Dear USPAP Instructor. Think of it as kind of a Dear Abby for USPAP instructors. If you've got a problem, if you've got a question that Mr. Tim Andersen can answer, you can send it to me, the coach at theappraisercoach.com, or you can send it directly to Tim, and his email is tim@theappraisersadvocate.com. Did I get that right, Tim?
Yes, Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay. So we have two questions on the table today. We're going to dive in. I think one will be pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Then we'll take a break and we'll head back for the little bit more complicated one, but I don't think this will be a long episode today, Tim. The first question on the docket is from Doug. Doug is a member of my All-Star team, by the way, and he asked me a question, and he said, Dustin, how important is the design, that I get the design right in the UAD form? And I guess what he's specifically talking about here is, if something's a split entry versus a split level, if something's a ranch versus a rambler. As of the last few years, there's very specific things. So, for example, I used to put 1-story, 2-story, 3-story. UAD tells me that's not valid anymore. I got to be more specific with the design. And Doug's concern is, what if I get it wrong?
Well, Doug, that's a valid concern, and thank you for raising the question. Obviously, there isn't that much of a difference between a ranch and a rambler. So the necessity is not so much to describe it succinctly, but to describe it accurately. And that's one of the reasons we have photographs. So you're going to describe it as whatever it is, and then you're going to say, see photographs attached, see floor plan attached, that kind of thing. I've looked at lots and lots and lots of state appraisal board decisions, and I must be honest, I've never seen anybody get in trouble because of their description of the architectural style. I've seen them get in trouble for leaving out a bedroom. I've seen them get in trouble for leaving off a story. I've seen them get in trouble for misrepresenting either too high or too low the Q and C qualifications, but I've never seen anybody get in trouble because they called it a rambler instead of a ranch.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. And I think it's important to point out that this qualification, obviously, USPAP says that we've got to describe the property, But it's Fannie Mae, if I'm not mistaken, Tim, it's Fannie Mae that has gone one step further with the UAD and said, no, there's very specific protocol that we want you to use in that descriptions. For example, C3 versus C4 versus C2, or Q1 versus Q6. And part of that protocol has been, we want a specific design, and one story doesn't cut it anymore. So that's more of a Fannie Mae thing rather than a USPAP thing?
Yeah, USPAP requires the appraiser to identify the subject property, but then it says you can use photographs, you can use drawings, you can use floor plans, all sorts of things. USPAP does not limit the appraiser to one specific or particular data source, whereas Fannie Mae gets a whole lot more excited about stuff like that. But then the reason they do is because part of what they have to do is assess the risk of changes in trends. And there was a time when geodesic dome houses were the thing to build. And that phenomenon lasted about 12 seconds. And then everybody figured out that, well, maybe they're not the thing to build. So Fannie is looking for a rather detailed description, basically so they can say, well, okay, this is your basic plain vanilla ranch house. That's not going to be a real problem. As time passes, people are still going to want that. Whereas if it's a 200-year-old Victorian, well, that may be a different story, because while Victorian houses are really quite attractive when they're properly fixed up, they tend to have a lot of rooms. The rooms are chopped up. The rooms are relatively small. They've got high ceilings because at the time because heat rose, therefore the cooler air was toward the bottom of the room. It kept the room cooler in the summer, but now that everybody has air conditioning, it's just that much more cubic footage to heat and cool, which is expensive. So as a result, Fannie Mae is not going to look as happily on something like a Victorian as it would on something like your basic 3-2, 1,800 square foot ranch house.
Right. Would you, maybe I'm taking this too far, Tim, and please feel free to slap me back down if I need to be, but I kind of can get in the shoes of Doug, and because I've been there as well. You know, you get into a situation where maybe a home could go two different directions. You know, I've heard of appraisers using the term traditional to cover a lot of bases. It's something that maybe it is a Victorian, maybe it's a craftsman, maybe it's something that, that could be called probably more accurately something else, but because I didn't know for sure, I'm not an architectural design expert, right? So I don't know, should I call this a craftsman? Should I call this a, whatever? I'm just going to call it traditional because I think that covers everything, right? There's a difference in my mind between that and, say, calling something a Victorian that is a ranch. That's a clear distinguishing feature. In other words, there's some designs that I think could maybe be mixed, and then there's others that if you've got a one-story ranch, it's certainly not a Victorian.
Right, and they're easy to distinguish, which is why I use those too.
Right.
As if you were dealing with a French provincial versus a French Mediterranean, now you're getting into a rather, not shady is not the right word, you're getting into a rather gray area between the two architectural styles. Okay, that's why you say, I think it's a French provincial, see photos.
Right.
And then let the underwriter decide what it is. But basically, if it's like every other house in the neighborhood, so what? It's like every other house in the neighborhood, and it'll be like some of your comps. Whereas if it's the only French Mediterranean design house in the neighborhood, that may prove to be a problem. But that's why the appraiser does a neighborhood analysis to determine if the market is looking for that type of property. Maybe the market doesn't care.
Right.
And, let's face it, in hot markets, people will buy houses in somewhat poor condition. They'll buy houses that are atypically small because they want in that neighborhood, and bidding is pushing the prices up. Whereas in other situations where the housing market has cooled off, probably that 1,800 square foot ranch house is going to sell before the French provincial. Yeah. Because there's just more of them.
And that goes to the question on the bottom. When we're talking Fannie Mae, of course, we're talking USPAP, we're talking Fannie Mae, but specifically with Fannie Mae, the bottom of page 1 specifically asks, I don't know the exact question, but it's, does the subject conform with other homes in the neighborhood? And I think, if I can just put a plug in, appraisers don't just naturally always mark yes. I mean, sometimes you got to step back and say, no, actually, this home doesn't really conform to the rest of the homes in the neighborhood.
Well, the issue here Dustin, is, okay, the appraiser checks yes. Okay, moves on. Fine. Now, let's suppose, Dustin, that you're the Idaho State investigator, and you're interviewing someone who's had a complaint filed against them. So you say, okay, Tim, you indicated that the house conformed to the rest of the neighborhood. And I go, yeah. And you look at the subject, and the subject is a geodesic dome. And then you say, okay, Tim, remembering who I am, I'm essentially the appraisal police, and whatever you say can and will be used against you. How in the world did you arrive at that conclusion?
Right.
And then I've got somehow to justify it. But I said, yeah, it conforms. So you, the investigator, have every right to say, okay, why and how did you come up with that conclusion?
Yeah. Wise counsel from a wise man. We're talking with Tim Andersen. He, of course, is the appraiser's advocate, and you can get a hold of Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com. Yeah, so I was pleasantly surprised, Tim, to hear your lovely radio voice and teaching me some great things. And that's one of the great things about OREP. It's not just about insurance. It's also about the great benefits, including 14 hours of free continuing education. And these are, by the way, education that I could count for all 3 states that I'm licensed in. Absolutely amazing. Check them out. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org for more information. Of course, we're sponsored by A la Mode. A la Mode is the software that I've been using for over 20 years, and there's a reason I stick with that company. Folks, I'm all about efficiency. I'm all about utilizing technology for my benefit. And I'm all about leveraging what can be done on the technology side to allow me to be a better business owner. And that's what A la Mode is all about. If you've not checked them out recently, please do so. Go to alamode.com, or you can pick up the phone and call them at 800-ALA-MODE. By the way, I sent an individual to them the other day who was with another company. I'm not going to mention who they were with. And I said, I want you to call A la Mode and just ask them the question, how are you different? Convince me to go over to A la Mode. And next thing you know, this individual had moved to A la Mode. Do the same thing. Pick up the phone. Call them at 800-ALA-MODE. Finally, we're sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster is, again, the ability to leverage technology, and specifically to save 30 to 60 minutes on every single appraisal report that you do if they are in your area. Check them out. Go to datamasterusa.com and go to their coverage area and find out if they are in. You can boil it right down to the board of realtors that you belong to. If they are in partnership with that board of realtors, folks, what are you waiting for? Datamaster USA is where it's at. It's datamasterusa.com. All right, folks, we are back. We are talking with the USPAP expert, Mr. Tim Andersen. Welcome back, Tim.
Hi, Dustin. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's good to be with you.
Well, it's always good to be with you because I don't always know the answer to these really important questions, and you seem to know a lot more than I do, so I'll just defer to you on hard questions. I'll take the easy ones. How's that?
Or I'm better at making stuff up.
Whatever. It works. It works.
Yeah.
All right. So had a question come in. Another All-Star team member, by the way, wrote in, and I'm just going to read this one. What is the proper protocol when a new client/lender wants you to, quote, transfer, unquote, an appraisal you did for a different client to them? I know you have to treat it like a new assignment order. In other words, this person knows that much, right? What type of comment should you include, and what else needs to be done?
Okay, there is no transfer protocol. You can't transfer an appraisal to another client without the first client's permission.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I recommend appraisers not even seek that permission.
Right.
Because that just opens up too many doors and too many questions you have to answer. Or that somebody has to answer.
Right.
That's usually you, and you want to avoid that if you can.
Right. Liability.
So basically, Dustin, we talked about this earlier. You made the suggestion of getting with that lender and saying, well, okay, lender, I'll be happy to do that. I'll do it as a retrospective appraisal, as the effective date will be the date I inspected the house for the first appraisal. But yes, it's a brand new assignment, and it will state clearly that my value opinion is retrospective to that date. The report will state clearly that I have appraised the property previous to this assignment. Mm-hmm. However, I will not be giving up anything confidential from that assignment to you. But yes, it'll be your appraisal lender to do with as you choose and need.
Okay, so let's establish a couple of things. First of all, this individual, I know this individual, and this is a smart appraiser. There's a reason that he or she put quotation marks around the word transfer, because I think what they're trying to portray is this is what typically happens. They call us or email us and say, I want you to, quote, transfer. They don't use quote. They just say, I want you to transfer the appraisal into my name. And by the way, I have a letter from the previous client, the previous bank, stating that you can do this. But just to make it very clear, Tim, you can't do that. There's no such thing as a transfer.
No, and it's simply because the USPAP does not say the client B gets in touch with client A to ask client A if client A will transfer the job to client B. They do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's common.
Right.
That's exactly what happens when your lender sells the paper to Fannie Mae.
Exactly.
So that's no big deal. You, the appraiser, have to receive that permission specific to that assignment, specific to an assignee,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better term. But then again, well, USPAP says you can't transfer it without the client's permission. I recommend you don't even ask.
Right.
Simply because it opens too many doors, the questions behind which you probably don't want to answer.
Right.
And chances are the second client already has a copy of the appraisal.
Right.
They're probably going to read it to you over the phone.
Right.
So as a result, they don't need a copy of the old appraisal. They got one. They need their own appraisal. And of course, that opens up a potential can of worms, because what if in your first appraisal you made an error? Now,
Mm-hmm.
do you fix it in the second one? Well, if you fix it in the second one, now it's different than the first one, which the second client has a copy of to
Right,
begin with.
right.
So that's a very difficult question. It's a difficult object to take on, and if you can avoid it, avoid it. If
Yeah.
you can't, you can't. There's no way around that. But the big problem is, what if you discover a mistake? What if you found, oh, I didn't consider this sale because you didn't find it,
Mm-hmm.
even though you should have? Well, that calls into question due diligence and a few other things which you don't want to have called into question. And then, ooh, my word, that sale that you didn't find that you should have found in the first appraisal changes the value. Ooh, now things are really looking funky.
Right.
And so, therefore, if there's any way you can avoid that, you want to avoid that. But sometimes you can't.
So maybe I went too far on this last week. So let me just share with you. I'm going to call it a hypothetical situation. But it's not. It was a real situation. So last week I got when my office received an email from Bank B. Okay, and by Bank B I mean they were not the client on the appraisal, and they actually included a PDF copy of my appraisal in the email with a PDF copy of a letter from Bank A giving permission for Bank B to take over the loan. And for lack of getting into too much detail, the Bank B basically was requesting an XML copy of the appraisal. They didn't want the lender changed. They didn't want a transfer done. They simply wanted an XML copy for their purposes. But their Bank B asking for it. They did have a letter from Bank A, and maybe I went too far, but I told them no. I told them I couldn't give them an XML copy because they weren't the client. And they, of course, said, well, that's okay. We have permission from the client. And I said, okay, then get it from the client. If you want an XML copy, get it from client A.
But the point is, Dustin, you didn't have permission from the client.
Well,
And
okay.
that's the
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Let me raise an issue here. Confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of appraisers don't understand confidentiality. They're, hey, what's confidential about it? The Bank B is reading to me
Right.
from my own appraisal.
They had a
over the
copy.
telephone.
Yeah.
How is it possibly confidential? Well, the point is, confidentiality does not apply to the client. Confidentiality applies to the appraiser.
Mm.
And the appraiser, by maintaining confidentiality, maintains a certain protection that the appraiser would give up if the appraiser violated confidentiality. In other words, Dustin, by saying no, basically what you said was, well, this is confidential to my client. I'm going to leave it that way. That way, I'm liable solely to my client. If I do what you're asking me to do, then I abandon that confidentiality, and now I'm liable not only to my first client for that appraisal,
Right.
I'm also responsible to you for that appraisal. And,
Right.
oh, by the way, you didn't pay me.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, now you want to send me lots and lots of money. Okay, maybe I'll relax my ethics. No, but the point is, why give them the benefit of an appraisal for free?
Exactly.
So that's the business standpoint, but the pure ethics of it is by maintaining confidentiality, you protect yourself. And that's the whole point. You limit your liability to your original client. You do not extend your liability to anybody. And then if Bank B just absolutely has to have an appraisal, fine. Provide them an appraisal, a brand new one, and charge them for it. And whatever the market will bear, charge them for it. And, you got two kids, okay? One kid falls out of a tree, breaks his arm. 6 weeks later, the second kid falls out of the same tree, breaks the arm. You don't go back to the doctor and say, "Doctor, set the second kid's arm and give me a volume discount." Okay, that just doesn't happen. But yet, that's exactly what the banks are asking us to do. They're saying, "Well, why should I have to pay for an appraisal? I'm sitting here looking at the appraisal you did for Bank A. Just send me a copy of it." Well, you've got a copy of it. Why do I need to send it? Applying a little logic, and their argument collapses. So we have confidentiality, Dustin, if for no other reason than to protect us. And as we maintain confidentiality, we do not extend our liability to other folks. And basically, that's what we're looking for. We don't want to extend our liability. Think about this very carefully. If you were to do what Bank B said, but yet you don't have an appraisal with Bank B, if Bank B went after you and you made a charge against your E&O, they probably wouldn't pay it because that bank was never your client. You never did an appraisal for them.
Right.
So confidentiality serves a purpose. There may be some silly parts to it, but it serves a purpose. And one of them is to protect the appraiser.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man. I think you and I are on the same page. I'm glad I didn't feel like I went overboard with that. I think I'd rather protect myself than hang myself out to dry. What do they say? Give yourself a rope for someone else to hang you with, right?
Exactly.
All right, my friend, you are providing quite a service to appraisers. Of course, you have your own podcast now called The Appraiser's Advocate. If folks, if you have not subscribed to The Appraiser's Advocate on, what are you on now? iTunes, Stitcher Radio, what?
Dustin, I don't know.
It's out there. It's out there.
I put them on put them on through Blueberry, and Blueberry sends them wherever
they do. Yeah.
Them.
Okay.
I think it's on Apple. I think it's
it
on
is.
Apple.
I can guarantee it's on Apple, and that's how I listen to it.
Yeah, I think it's on Stitcher. It's not on Libsyn.
If nothing else,
I'm sorry.
I was just say, if nothing else, you can just go to your website, theappraisersadvocate.com, and you can listen to it right there.
Go to podcasts, and then click on it.
Yeah.
And you'll hear it. But we've got a bunch of them up there, and I tend to put up about 3 a month.
That's beautiful.
As the muses strike me.
Well, and I love, for those listeners who have not started listening to your podcast, let me just say this. Unlike me, who has diarrhea of the mouth, Tim is very succinct, he uses brevity, and he's very wise. So these are usually less than 10 minutes a piece, and they're excellent if you want to become a better appraiser. So highly recommend. But you're providing some other services as well, Tim. Tell us a little bit about that.
Dustin, now that I'm quote-unquote retired, when I'm surprised that I'm still working very hard, but now that I'm quote-unquote retired, basically what I do is consult with other appraisers on USPAP issues, on writing issues, on issues of state law, stuff like that. I'm not an attorney. Please don't make that mistake. I'm not an attorney. I can't offer legal advice. What I do is, somebody calls me up, hey, I got a USPAP question. What should I do? So we talk about it, and we come up with a solution. And the whole reason I got involved in this is because I was involved with appraisers who were up before their states and needed advocacy on their part, not legal advocacy, but USPAP advocacy. I remember one instance the state had charged an appraiser with violating USPAP, and that problem wasn't even mentioned in USPAP. And when I pointed that out to the attorney, and the attorney pointed that out to the state dropped that charge in a big hurry.
Wow.
So we do provide a service. We do help appraisers who find themselves on the wrong end of that letter from the state. We also help appraisers who don't want to find themselves on the wrong end of that letter from the state by reviewing their reports, not standard 3-4, but for USPAP compliance, for lapses in logic and reasoning, for atrocious grammar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But since I'm out of the retail end of the appraisal business, that's what I do now.
Awesome. It's a great service that you provide, and appraisers would be well to look that direction. Thank you again, my good friend Tim, for joining us, and my best to you and your family, of course, and until next time.
Dustin, thank you. My best to you and all of yours.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
So the important point is to describe it not necessarily succinctly. One grandson. So
that's going to make a good Easter egg.
We'll start over again.